Yeah, I got it.
Hey, hey. And here we go. We've started on time. Woohoo! For those who were around last week, we started a little bit late, so thanks everyone for the feedback. And you learn from your mistakes. That's the way of the world. And I just wanted to thank everyone who's already shown up to watch this thing live. And I also wanted to thank a whole new team of people who have come on board the Chinwag this week. And as we can see here, we've got Paul Murphy back as the co-host. And then Al Manders down in the corner is a guest co-host. And then our main guest, our guest speaker, is Mary Blazewski. And we'll be talking about assistant editing and what that process is like. Join in the chat. We've got a feed that I keep my eye on to make sure that we hit your questions. So make sure you jump in and give us your questions as we go through the show. And I will be doing my timer as I did the couple of weeks before, so we don't go over time. I'll throw it over to Paul and Al and Mary. Paul, why don't you take it off from here?
Okay. Mary, welcome to the show. Now, you are joining us to talk about assistant editing, is that correct? And can you tell us a little bit about your just your background in terms of where you come from and what you're doing at the moment?
Sure. At the moment, I'm currently editing a feature drama, which was shot in Melbourne. It's called Shit, and it's directed by Trudy Hellier and Sizzy D, and it's based on an award-winning play written by Patricia Cornelius. And we are in the process of editing, so we're still editing currently. And before this, I worked as an assistant editor for a number of years, and then I stopped working as an assistant editor for a number of years, and then here I am today doing this.
And this is your first feature film as the lead editor?
Yeah.
Actually, I haven't asked you this. Are you doing this with any other editors, or are you the sole editor on the project?
Editor, yeah.
Do you have an assistant editor working on this project?
We had an assistant editor called Jerry just for the shoot. So we had a 3-week shoot and we had an assistant editor, but no assistant editor currently.
Mm-hmm.
It's a small budget feature.
And that work that you were doing beforehand, were you assistant editing in Premiere or some other editing platforms?
When I worked as an assistant editor, I never used Premiere. I used Avid mainly, Final Cut Pro, and Lightworks as well. I've been assistant edited. I've worked as an assistant on with Nick Myers. This was actually my first job, and he cut on a flatbed.
Oh, really?
35mm film, yeah. And that was for the bank.
And is there anybody still arguing that we should be cutting on flatbeds these days?
Well, I don't think anyone was cutting on flatbeds even then. But
then, right.
But Nick argued for it. Nick Myers.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so what is your background with Premiere then? And what sort of made you want to cut this film on Premiere?
So I've been... I made the transition to Premiere from Final Cut 7. So I've been using Final Cut 7 for small projects. Like I worked with artists and I did some short artist interviews and stuff like that. And then when Final Cut changed to 10, I realised I didn't like it at all, and I felt I couldn't work with it in the way that I wanted to. And so then someone told me about Premiere. And I then thought, oh, yeah, I'll have a look. And as soon as I got on, it just felt immediately comfortable. And I thought, yeah, this is good. So I did some small projects with it. And then when this came up, being a low budget feature, I thought it was probably a good opportunity to give Premiere a go with it.
And what is it that you found that you liked about using Premiere that really helped with this project?
I think I liked that it was like Final Cut 7, and I immediately could kind of navigate around it. And I liked the trim aspect of it. I just thought, yeah, that's good. That works well. That's an important thing to have right when you're cutting. And yeah, I thought everything worked well. There was something that I was not clear about, which was the syncing of brushes. And I tried to kind of get in touch with other editors or find other editors and assistant editors who'd worked with Premiere in a feature, either in a feature doc or a feature drama. And I found it hard to find people, actually. And then eventually I did talk to an editor who cut a feature doc, and she put me on to her assistant. And then from him, I spoke to a few other assistants, but all kind of, but they'd done it a while ago, and no one could really tell me how to do the syncing correctly, actually. And everyone that I spoke to said that you may run into problems when you turn over. So I kind of started to worry.
Yeah.
And that's where John came in.
That's how we met,
that's where
isn't
John
it?
came in, thankfully. Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we were about 4 or 5 days into the shoot, and I was syncing clips using the merge function. And I did have a feeling that it probably wasn't the right way to go, but I couldn't find clarification around it. And then, someone put me in touch with John, and then John very kindly came on and set us on the straight path. And then
what was that? What was that straight path in the end?
So it was using like nested sequences, really. So it wasn't, so that you could retain your metadata, so that when you did come to turnover, things didn't go pear-shaped, particularly for sound. So it'd retain all the metadata.
So, Paul, you've got quite a bit of experience with this sort of nesting type of experience.
Did you send that to me, John? Are you saying I've had experience with that?
Yeah, I know that.
You know what? It's been a long time since I've used merged clips in a project.
No, not merged clips. That's the thing.
Oh.
You shouldn't use merged clips. That's one of the things we want to clarify in this this week's episode, is that merged clips originally had a place, but when it comes to handing over, you don't do that. You use nesting, or a version of nesting, which is actually multicam workflow, which is what I went and helped sort out at River Studios with Mary. So, Paul, I want to set up a demo of it, but do you want to talk about your experience using nesting? Because I know that's how you've always cut.
Yeah, so I would never call it nesting, though. I would always call it multicam. And in fact, I recently delivered a film using multicam clips. And, I've been delivering films that have been cut using multicams for many years now. But, and just because usually I'm delivering films 2, 3, 4 years apart, there's always something different about the technology now. And I remember when I delivered my first film, I tried to spit an AAF out of Premiere, and it was just hopeless. It was no good.
Yeah.
We had to go XMLs and EDLs and things like that. Now, on this most recent film, which I first delivered in November, because we said locked, but we didn't mean locked. We delivered it again in June. But when I delivered that, I thought I would run a test with the AAF going out of Premiere Pro. So I'd sunk all of my video and audio, even though it wasn't multiple angles, it was just one video and multiple audio. I sunk all of it using multicam sequences. So, selecting them in the project panel, selecting clip, multicam sequence, some of it sunk using timecode, some of it sunk using just the audio waveform. So that's how the dailies were sunk by my assistant. And then I wanted to run a test to see how that would be interpreted through an AAF to go to Pro Tools. And what I found really amazing that had happened with AAFs between the last time I delivered and this time was that I didn't have to even flatten that multicam. So when you flatten something, it will actually revert back to the original media. So we're using the word nesting, which is exactly what it is. It's a sequence that has those clips inside of it. When I exported my AAF to Pro Tools, I didn't flatten it at all, and it was still referencing that original media. That AAF was smart enough that it was referencing my original media, original channels, and everything, names of the channels. All of that was going through to Pro Tools without me having to actually flatten it. And, you know, maybe flattening is a good practice. I don't know. I found that I didn't need it at all. And there was one other thing I wanted to mention about the AAF, actually. You really should delete your video track. And I just cannot explain why that is. But I found that if I left my video track in there, it would sort of confuse Pro Tools when I got to the Pro Tools end.
Okay.
So what I actually do when it comes to delivery is that I duplicate my master sequence, lock my audio, delete my video, and then send out that AAF like that. And it's just referencing all that original media.
It seems to be an issue with AAFs. I remember on a show I worked on, we made the transition from OMF to AAF.
Yes.
And we thought, oh, well, you know, let's drop and this was on an Avid system, not Premiere at the time, but we included the video. And even with Avid being the controller of the AAF protocol, the video had problems with Pro Tools. So from that point on, we said, righto, let's just get rid of all video tracks. Keep the audio, and away it went. It worked fine. And since then, I've always used that for Premiere as well.
And all the metadata goes across. The only metadata that doesn't go across from the audio files, that is the channel naming. So, you know, I've got multiple. I've got a broadcast wave that has multiple channels in it, and the sound guy has nicely gone in and named those separate channels. You know, person 1, person 2, mix down, boom, whatever. That stuff does not transfer across. And I really sort of tried to get it across, but ultimately what I found was that it just wasn't going to transfer in the AAF, so I sort of gave up on that. But otherwise, I found AAF out using multicam syncing was just such a seamless process compared to 10 years ago.
10 years ago, I was using Pluralize. And that was just, well, was it around 10 years ago? I can't really remember, but
longer.
Yeah. It was a horrible experience. And then when I came across multicam syncing in Premiere, it was like, oh, thank God, this is great. So easy, so simple.
So what I'll do, I'll actually show it. I think it'd be good to just show this. Yeah,
can I specify something there too? That's the audio side of things. On the picture side of things, that's a separate timeline, duplicate of your master sequence, and I do flatten that. So when I go out XML to DaVinci or wherever, I do flatten that timeline before I XML out to DaVinci.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll sort of walk through this, and while I'm doing that, Mary, do you have some thoughts you want to share about that side of things? Did you know about all this sort of stuff? Where are you at on your journey with the delivery side now that we've just explained that?
Yeah, it's good for me to hear actually, because I've been wondering about it. I've been well, I know you set us up properly, with the multicam way of syncing rushes. So I'm sure we'll be fine when we come to deliver. But I have been wondering about it, and I was wondering about this flattening thing because I'd heard about it. So it's just good to hear you talk about it just then. But we're not at delivery stage yet. We will be hopefully soon.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, I'll just show those who are watching what this system looks like. I've got on screen now my copy of Premiere Pro, and there's 2 folders. One folder's full of audio that was recorded separately, and then another one has got the video that was recorded, and it does have some sort of audio in there, but I won't be using the audio as the sync point because this was done with proper time code. So there's let me see now. I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 clips, and then there's stereo audio to sync with each of them. So I've got 10 audio clips. So when I select all of those different clips and then I right click the group and I go to create multi-camera source sequence, this is not an obvious way of dealing with sync. It's called multi-camera, but it's actually how you go about doing the right quick way to actually get proper sync. So at the top here, instead of having the name of what it makes, video clip name plus multicam, which is the default, I'm going to put underscore sync. So then I know that what I've made is actually a sync of the clip. And then I'll change the synchronize point to time code. And then I will leave everything else the way that it is set up, except the camera names. I want to use the track names. So that way, if the camera needs a better description, I could do it there. You could use the clip names as well. And then that way, if you do rename the clip, it concatenates through. And then that means that that's what you get to see as the name of it. But I digress. Let's just hit OK, and we'll see what happens. Right. Everything is moved. All those clips that I've done work on, I didn't untick the processed clips bin, and that's for good reason. Now, the reason why I've left it is because I want to see if there was anything that got missed. And I can see that all the videos are out and in processed clips, and all the audio is out and in processed clips. So I'll just go back and put them back in the place that they should go. But that helps me to see whether or not any of the sync points actually got missed out of place. They actually didn't work. So now I've got 5 setups of what is now the sync of each clip, and the clip has got the name and then the underscore sync underneath all of them. So if I come back out here, let me just close all of these little timelines and grab one of these timelines, empty timeline here, and drop one of these clips into it. You can see that it's actually treating it as a multicam. And if I was to hold Control or Command on the Mac and double click on the clip, you can see what's going on inside of it. It's actually an advanced kind of nest. So when I was using the term nest, it's kind of what it really is. And then when it comes to the flattening side of things, when you chop things up, and we'll just chop stuff up a bit here and maybe rearrange it. Okay. And then I'll select all of these shots and right click on them. And then in multi-camera, there's this flatten option. And when you flatten it, it actually goes back and refers to the actual clips. So then when you push that out, either AAF or XML, it actually references the real clips, especially the vision. But that's how that works. Now, there's no way to go and undo that, right? There's no way to go into the multicam and say, well, now I want to unflatten that. So the best practice is to take the sequence that you feel is vision locked, it's ready to be handed over, find the sequence, duplicate it, and then rename that one as flat. Just so you know. So you haven't lost any cuts. Open up the flat one and then select all, right click, multi-camera, flatten. And then that way you deliver the flat one. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah? Cool.
Makes sense.
Mary, as an AE, were you responsible for doing that sort of stuff, or was that what the editor did as his or her part of the job?
No, well, just the assistant editor would do turnovers. Yeah, always. Yeah, on features. So, yeah.
So this is pretty important for the assistant to know this kind of technical ins and outs.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I almost feel as though a more sort of formalized process needs to be somehow put out there for assistant editors in Premiere, because as with the situation you found yourself in, Mary, it feels like too much of it is, hushed whispers behind the scenes. You only find out that you should have chosen multicam and not merged clips, which is a feature in Premiere, and it sounds like exactly what you should be using. There should be some sort of assistant editor's instruction kit for Premiere Pro. I think they've got it for Avid. We need it for Premiere as well.
Yeah, I think that'd be fantastic, really. I mean, for us, I was just feeling really stressed, not knowing how to do it, to be honest. Yeah. And I kind of thought, well, I'm going to do it this way. The words make sense. It's syncing the clips. I can cut the clips. I'm sure it's right. And of course, very quickly, I thought, well, maybe it's not right. And so, yeah. And we only had one camera. I didn't have any multicam. So maybe it would have been different if I had multicam as well. Would have thought of it. Not sure.
John, the word legacy gets thrown around so much inside of Premiere. We've got legacy titles, legacy effects. Why can't we have merged clips, brackets, legacy?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I think to tear that bit out is attached to other bits of code that it's a mess. So let's just call it as it is. It's a bit of a mess. The merge,
I reckon hold on to the feature, but just put that, we're going to have legacy titles for another 5 years, surely.
Probably, because a lot of people do use it. And there were some things in the new title
that doing that.
Yeah, there were things in the new titler that weren't there yet that you could do in the original titler that a lot of people used. And so those legacy things sort of stick around for a while, and we wait for the use case to die off. So we can't, at Adobe, we can't see who exactly uses what, but we can see how many effects actually get used. We get these little reports that come up every now and then from every machine that runs, and then it tells us what got used. So that's how a lot of these obsolete things become decided they're obsolete, because there's really a very small amount of people that actually use it. So yeah, merge clips still gets used a lot, unfortunately. And that's usually when people stay inside the same ecosystem. They don't need to hand over to a different set of tools that needs to understand what's going on at the core source file level. So might be a little while.
But there is another, even if you do it internally, there is another key reason not to use merge clips, and that's because of Q and W. So two most important shortcuts on the timeline, Q and W, which is trim playhead to here and here. And if you've got those merge clips where the audio is a different length to the video, it completely screws up how they react to Q and W.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Anyway, let's get back on the topic of assistant editing. What are some of the other things, Mary, that you have found over the years with doing your bulk of your career as an assistant editor, and now being a feature editor, the sort of things you really look for in, and that feature editors look for in an assistant?
I think for an assistant editor, I think you've just got to prep things for the editor the way that they want it prepped. So each editor will have a different kind of way of wanting their bins organized, for example. And so you really just have to, just check with the editor and see how they want those organized and done. But mainly you just want to, as an assistant editor, not miss anything. So you really want all those clips sunk properly and in the appropriate scene bins, and you don't want to miss anything, because I think that's really annoying for an editor to go chasing things.
When I've never worked as an assistant editor, when you start working with a new editor, how do they sort of communicate to you the way that they want things done? Are they showing you a project, or do they have like a document prepared? What's the example of a really bad, how an editor prepares badly for an assistant editor?
I don't know. I've always had the information. Most of the time the information is communicated just verbally, and then you set up the first day's rushes and just check in, really, check in and see if it was all right. I worked on an American show called The Pacific, and there were 3 editors on that show, and there were 3 assistants as well. And each editor had a certain way of wanting their bins set up. And each assistant editor had an editor designated. So, but sometimes, for whatever reason, you had to jump on and you had to work with a different editor to what you normally worked with. And so really we had to know how each editor wanted their project set up. So we ended up putting a list up and just like a step-by-step and with, like pictures, screen grabs and everything so that we all knew. And, it felt really important to them to just have the bin set up the way that they wanted to. And it cut time for them,
Why did you feel that Premiere was the right sort of product for you to use on this feature at the moment?
I thought I had used it for a short film just recently, and I'd used it for a project that I did for an artist, I think, which it was about 10 minutes long or something, but I didn't have to turn anything over. I did use Merge Clip, and I stayed within that kind of, zone. And I just thought that it was interesting that I didn't know anyone who'd cut a feature on Premiere. And I felt like, giving it a go, really. And also we were low budget. And so Avid wasn't, like, we did look at, going to a post house and seeing how much that might cost and using Avid, but it was quite expensive. And so it was just a very affordable way to do it on a low budget feature. I didn't think it, I also thought it would be quite intuitive. So I wanted to give it a go.
Mm-hmm. What else do you think aspiring assistant editors sort of need to be conscious of? I mean, there's that bin structure and obviously having files that are in sync, but what's that relationship like? Because I think a lot of people who want to get into feature films and longer form content don't really understand the relationship of the assistant editor to the feature editor or senior editor. Could you just go into that a little bit to sort of inspire some people? Like, these are the kind of things you need to look forward to.
Yeah. Well, I think most of the time, you have to understand most of the time it's just you and the editor. Like, it's just the two of you. So you've got to kind of like each other, I think. That's number one.
It's a good start.
If you don't get along, I think it's really, it'll be problematic. I think you've got to get along because you're going to spend a lot of time together, and sometimes in the same room together, 10 hours a day, 5 days a week. So that's probably number one. But yeah, I think just good communication, is the main thing. Good communication and just being very, just staying on top of it as an assistant editor, like just kind of almost being one step ahead of your editor, almost like just knowing what they might want, things that they might want prepped. Like some editors, want you to clean up their audio. Some want you to put audio, effects together for them. So just understanding what they want, not what you used to do on the previous project or how you did it before or how you did it on this show, because every show is different and every editor's needs are different to some extent.
Mary, how do you feel that things are going in the industry, given the fact that, more and more you're expected to know everything when it comes to a program? And also the craft and everything like that. Are assistant editors still as important, or are they beginning to blend?
I don't know. I haven't worked as an assistant editor for a very long time, so I don't really know. But I remember when I was working as an assistant editor, I was expected to be really technically good. And I actually wasn't technically good, to be honest. I just never I just kind of learned what I needed to know, but learn it well so that I didn't make mistakes and stuff like that. But I kind of, there's some assistant editors that can troubleshoot, technical problems really well. And that's great. And there are some editors who can troubleshoot technical problems and be really great editors. But there are a lot of editors that are just editors. They can't troubleshoot technical problems. And I think there's this kind of expectation that you should be technically fantastic if you're an editor or an assistant editor even. But I don't know. I think that kind of, I always felt the pressure of that, but I wasn't always technically great. But I was a very good assistant editor. So.
How about graphics and stuff like that? Does that usually come right at the very end, at the handover, or you have placeholder graphics? Al sort of does quite a bit of motion graphics and stuff like that. So I think Al was talking earlier to me about some questions he had around that topic. Al, do you have any questions around that exchange?
Yeah, when you're editing, well, I don't know if you've got many, VFX shots in this movie, being a low budget film, but
explosions
of shit, just shit
blood
exploding.
splatter.
What's been your? Have you dealt with that in the past? VFX shots added in halfway through the edit. Do you turn it over to the MoGraph or VFX artist at the end? What's been your experience?
I haven't had much experience with it, actually. I have worked on a couple of films. I worked on The Pacific, which had a lot of VFX, and they had their own VFX editor and VFX assistant editor. And I worked as an assistant editor on Where the Wild Things Are, Spike Jonze' film, and again, a lot of effects. And I had a designated VFX editor and team. And so it was almost separate to editorial. And I worked on both those projects while they were shooting here in Melbourne, and then they took it back to the States. So I wasn't part of that process, and I've never worked as a VFX assistant editor, so I don't really know.
As someone who, I think you said you studied arts in college, right?
Yeah, I went to art school, yeah.
Yeah.
Arts.
So what was it about assistant editing, which you did for quite a while, that you found the most fulfilling about it?
Well, when I was going through art school, I became really interested in video art. So a lot of my art used video, and I became really interested in kind of narrative structure. And then a friend of mine, Guy Bearfield, who's an artist, told me about a production that was coming to Melbourne, which was The Bank, and he was friends with Nick Myers, the editor. And they were looking for some assistant editors. They already had a couple, and as I said, they cut on flatbed. And so then I hooked up, and I just kind of said I'd go on and do things for free, kind of thing, just so I could learn. And I just wanted to bring things back to my art, really. I wasn't looking to be an assistant editor. But that experience really cemented it for me. So I just loved it. I just thought it was fantastic. And I did bring things back to my art practice. So that was kind of how I got involved, really. There was some sort of overlap between an interest in narrative structure in film and then kind of bringing it back to a contemporary kind of art context. Yeah.
Do you feel? Did you feel as though you were kind of absorbing some of the craft of these directors, people like Nick, sort of working alongside them, or were you kind of shut out of that process and it was more sort of manual, sort of labor sort of work?
It was with Nick Myers. He's an incredibly generous teacher, actually. So I was really fortunate for my first job to be with Nick Myers, and he just kind of taught me a lot and always was up for a chat or a discussion. And I never felt kind of shut out of it as such, but it was very labor intensive working with 35mm film. So, you're kind of flat out really in that way. And some editors, they do kind of, allow you to, like, they'll want you to assemble a scene or something, and then you've got kind of feel involved. But a lot of the time, you do feel a little bit shut out of it. It just depends. Yeah. And I think also that's why maybe it's tricky to make that
transition
for a lot of assistant editors. And I think most assistant editors do want to be an editor. And I think it's just difficult to make that transition. Yeah.
What a great film to work on for your first job.
I know.
It's an awesome Australian film. It really is.
Yeah, it was
for anybody
great.
that hasn't seen it, go and try and find
film.
a DVD of it. I don't know if it's out on Blu-ray or on any of the streaming platforms, but it's just a fantastic Aussie film.
Yeah, it was great. It's really good. Good experience.
Rob Connolly was the director. Is that, if I got that right?
Yeah.
Rob Connolly.
That was his first feature film.
Yeah, great film. Is there anything that you miss about cutting actual film or handling actual film?
Yeah, I really loved it. I just loved I actually even loved, I don't know, not many people know, you have to edge number the film and you use like an edge numbering machine. And I just love sitting at this edge numbering machine and doing it for a very long time. It's very, very meditative. But yeah, it was just a fun project. And I think Nick made it a fun project as well. It really depends on who you're working with, but yeah.
Because film was your first project, working with actual film, do you feel as though you're still conscious of that when you're working digitally? Are you still thinking of it in the same sort of way, or does it feel like a different beast entirely?
I think I did for a while think of it in the same way, but and maybe there is some things that I do.
Excuse me.
I don't think of it. I don't think of it in the same way, really. No, not in. But I did for a while, because I think even for a while when you were working with something like Avid, you still ended up going to print for some reason. I can't remember. You still ended up going to mill, and mag. So for a number of projects after that, I still kind of worked with it. And so it was an advantage to know that, actually.
Sorry, I coughed my lungs up there. How are we going for time? We've got about 4 minutes, maybe 3 minutes, really. I just wonder now about that. It sounds like there's been quite a few jumps in your career. There's been jumps in the technology, different softwares, your role, and now you've gotten into the role that you really wanted to get into, which is to be the feature editor. Have you got any advice for people who maybe have these desires but kind of hold themselves back a little about making those leaps, and what you've learned from that experience of so much change?
I don't really know what advice to give. I think everyone experiences it a little bit differently as well. I think some people make that transition quicker than others as well. But I think just kind of keep going for it. If that's really what you want to do, just keep going for it. And do it in different ways. Like, I worked with lots of artists, like I couldn't make the transition to a feature film editor, but I kind of found a different way to do it. So I started working with artists, and it was interesting for me because I always kind of straddled the two worlds as well. And then I don't really know apart from that. I'm sorry, what advice to get? I don't know, ask people, I think, as well.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going. So when you and I first spoke about this show, you were expressing a lot of this curiosity and this. You weren't put back at all by that sense of, I don't know this. That kind of just went, oh, well, I better go find out. And so you went. Yeah. You seem to go off and ask a lot of questions and kind of find out where these gaps of your knowledge could be filled. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, we are pretty close to time now. Is there anything else that you wanted to maybe bring up to do with some of the things that you're, the technical things, the challenges, the things that are sort of on your mind as the feature editor, and the kind of things that that assistant really just saves you when it comes to that relationship of the way that you work with an assistant? What's the number one thing? Oh, there's my timer.
Make it short.
What's that one thing that stands out at the moment?
I think we've already covered it, really.
Yeah?
I feel like we've covered it. Yeah.
Okay.
It's all about cool. Communication.
I think so. I think it's all about communication, and just just as an assistant, just trying to take direction from your editor and just kind of understand what they want, and just try and, I think a good working relationship is at the top, really.
Cool. Great. Well, we're going to wrap it up there. Thank you, Mary, for taking the time to jump on this silly little show that we're still in the infancy of doing. It's great to have a chat with you. Al, thanks for joining in for the first time as a guest co-host. And Paul, thanks for joining us again. I think, how many times have you been on the show now? This is episode 5. I think you've been involved
Feels like
27
50.
times now.
27 times, yeah.
All right. Well, thanks everybody. If you want to say anything to sign off, feel free to go for it now.
Goodbye.
See you.
Thanks very much. Bye.
Mary.
Righto.
Great to
Thank
see you.
you. See ya.
Thank you. Yeah. Bye.